a central bank digital currency, I guess, could make hyperinflation. How do I say it? You wouldn't have wheelbarrows of cash. It would just be the number would go up.
Yeah.
So it'd be easier to manage, but the net effect would still be the same. People would be getting their savings wiped out.
Right.
Of course, then you're going to toss universal basic income into that, where that gets put on your CBDC card.
Welcome to this RTD interview. Today, I'm excited to have first-time guest, Mr. Jim Forsythe, an aerospace engineer and former New Hampshire state senator, and now chair of the Citizens for Sound Money. And today, he's joining us to share his thoughts on the economy and the importance of reestablishing sound money back into the people's hands on a day-to-day basis. And so, Jim, welcome to RTD interviews.
Thanks for inviting me. Real honor. Thanks.
Well, I appreciate you, as I mentioned beforehand, having you sit down and share a little bit more about Citizens for Sound Money, as well as just your thoughts, because it looks like you guys are very active in encouraging people to get possession of silver, as well as using it in actual day-to-day transactions. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on a little bit about yourself, as well as how Citizens for Sound Money came about, if you don't mind sharing with us.
Sure. So Citizens for Sound Money is a 501c4, so a nonprofit, and we're organized to encourage people to use sound money and protect their right to do so. A little bit of my background is I actually studied Russian as a kid and went to the Soviet Union, and seeing the Soviet system firsthand really gave me a very strong passion for free markets. I joined the Air Force. I was a KC-135 pilot, and then I got out after about 12, 13 years, got into business. But then I wound up getting endorsed by Ron Paul. I was active in his 2008 campaign. Ran for state senate and got elected in 2010, and then was his New Hampshire campaign chair in 2012. And so while I was a believer in free markets, he really introduced me the concept of sound money and why it's so important. And then when kind of silver squeeze kicked off last year, I started looking at it, and I think now is the time where we start to see, the dollar unwind and for sound money to reexert itself. So we started up this nonprofit to try to encourage people to do that. And my executive director, Marion Ward, has been helping me out. And we've got a great advisory board, about 10 people that have really worked hard to, get the message out there.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so let's just jump right in. And so at this current moment, as I mentioned before we went live on air, clearly the system is unraveling. More people are waking up to the dangers and the consequences of the either deliberate or unintended consequences of having a centrally controlled entity over our nation's money, which of course is never meant to be that way. But here we are now. It's too late to look back, only can look forward. And so more people are waking up to the importance of gold and silver as actual money in and of itself. And so my question to you is, at this current moment, is it still time? Is there still enough time to try to continue to push forward, reaching the masses, given the fact the Federal Reserve is hiking and all this stuff happening around us? How do you continue to press forward in trying to educate people and wake people up?
Yeah, as strange as it is, there still is time. I mean, if you look at gold and silver, they've been in gold and silver had a nice run heading into 2020. Since then they've been relatively flat as inflation starts to kick in. And it's interesting, people say, well, it's not really protecting people from inflation, but it just did it in advance. Gold ran from $1,200 all the way up to, $1,900. And it's going to continue to serve its role as a currency and an inflation hedge. But yeah, this long consolidation period means there has been time for people to spread the message, people to get in, before it's kind of, I won't say too late, but we've had these periods where when people lose confidence in the monetary system, gold and silver will outperform. And then when confidence is regained, like it was in 2011, they'll pull back. But I think this is the final time for the dollar. I don't think it's going to survive. If you look at fiat currencies throughout history, there's been, I think, thousands of them. And their track record is 0 successes. Every single one has been a failure, usually around 30 to 50 years. And we're right around 50 years. And so I think this time won't be any different. And I think it's very important for people to get into, it doesn't just have to be gold and silver, but real assets as opposed to paper assets. That can be farmland is a great one, property, base metals, and anything that's tangible and real. But then, gold and silver serve a special role because they're, precious. And so you can have a small amount of them and yet be very valuable. If you saved all your money in oil, your basement would be full of oil, kind of thing. So instead you buy gold and silver, and if you look at the gold to oil ratio, it's tracked in a range for 100 years. So if you get gold, that'll allow you to buy oil in the future, without having to worry about the effects of inflation eating away your purchasing power.
All right, good point there. Now, I'm curious to get your thoughts, because a lot of people, from just a monetary literacy standpoint, as I like to I'm not sure if that phrase I coined it or not, but the basic principles of what money has been, what it is now, and what it might be in the future. There's a transition right now. Everything seems to be heading towards a digital sphere of things, with the possible introduction at some point of the CBDC here in the US, as well as a new technology that's getting everybody's attention, the digital asset Bitcoin space. But beyond those things there, when gold and silver was, I guess, recategorized as a commodity rather than money, I think that definitely hindered people's ability to understand what money actually is. Do you think we're going to get back to that point where, it will no longer be gold in particular, gold and silver in particular, be labeled as a commodity rather as money? Because the price mechanism to set it, it's always categorized as a commodity amongst the other items in that basket. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought is that gold and silver never ceased being money. It's actually when we went off, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, all the economists, not all the economists, but the traditional economists, the ones who are always wrong, said, this is, without a monetary role for gold, its value is going to go down. And instead, we saw just the opposite. We saw gold and silver spike really high after we went off the dollar standard. So in other words, even though the US said it's no longer money, everybody else still viewed it as money, and it continued to be treated like money. And you see, central banks around the world are accumulating gold because it's, can't be printed. So gold never ceased being money. There's this misunderstanding today that governments determine what money is, and that's just plain and simple not true. Gold and silver arose as money naturally. People, when they were trading between each other, you might have cows, somebody else has chickens, and you want to trade them, and maybe that's fine. But then you want to trade for something the other person doesn't have, so you need some sort of medium of exchange, something universally recognizable, not easily faked, fungible, can be divided up. And gold just naturally arose. It's only later that governments got involved in coining, and then abusing that privilege like the Romans did, and, diluting the content. So governments don't determine what is money, people do. And that's the big push for our organization is, we're not pushing for the US to back the dollar by gold. We're pushing for people to start using gold and silver as money. And we have this great opportunity, like you said, you see all these digital forms of money arising. Is the thing that went wrong with the gold standard was, we used paper certificates as IOUs, and there was fractional reserve lending, and then the Fed got involved, and that made things go downhill. But with a digital system that's on the blockchain, is auditable, can be verified, we can have multiple different groups that are offering gold as money through digital services, and then have it be redeemable, so you can get the gold and silver and make essentially cash transactions locally, anonymously. So we have this real opportunity, I think, to not only readopt gold and silver as money, but to do it in a way that's far superior than what we were doing 100 years ago.
All right, very true. And going back to that, or utilizing technology, are there concerns, or will there possibly be concerns of trust? Because you're still having the intermediary parties, custodians that actually hold the metals, verifiable proof on ledgers to whether things, are balanced out. So could that possibly be a concern in the future as well? Because there's still some middlemen that play a major role in how that plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty of gold and silver. When physically held, it is one of the few things that has no counterparty risk. You own it and it's yours. Um, so trust. If you start looking at the digital, digital backed currencies that are backed by gold and silver, then yeah, trust is absolutely important, and that's why um, I'm a big fan of there not being one system, and especially it not being a government system. There's numerous. There's Kinesis, Load, Cash. There's a number of others, and we wouldn't want one of those to emerge as the sole provider. This notion of a Federal Reserve Bank being the one central bank is that's not historically been the way things are. I mean, Jefferson and Hamilton fought over having a central bank. And Jackson eliminated the second central bank. And it's because central banks, they take that counterparty risk and concentrate it into one entity, and one that serves the political class. Before that, or, when we didn't have a central bank, you have numerous different banks, you deposit your gold, you'd get a certificate. You'd have to trust that local bank. And sometimes, they'd lever up too much and they'd go bankrupt and people would lose their money. But on the whole, that competition kept the banks relatively honest. And that's what I see in the future is, we won't have a central digital gold currency, but we will have multiple competing companies, kind of competing for our trust. And, maybe you don't put all your assets into one of them. Maybe you put some in different ones. But then, of course, you should always have physical gold and silver on your person or in your house in a safe that's completely absent counterparty risk.
All right, very important. Now, based upon all the activity happening around the world, of course, our attention has been drawn towards the geopolitical conflicts between Russia and Ukraine, and of course, China, Taiwan. So I've been talked about a lot about the de-dollarization process and how there's some competing forces out there that's trying to remove the Federal Reserve System out of its predominant standing and bring in something else. And of course, gold clearly looks like it's a part of that because of the accumulation of the Eastern nations. But do you think at some point in the near future or long-term future that there will be a new medium of accountability from a international standpoint, where we will no longer use the dollar symbol to resemble the primary medium that everybody has to have in reserve form, or what? Because also that'll play into how we view an ounce of gold or silver over here. We'll still probably use the word dollar, but it won't carry as much weight as it does now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, this has already been happening, and Luke Grumman, Lynn Alden are great people to follow on this, but the world has been de-dollarizing. The use of the dollar as currency has declined as a percentage basis, and certainly what's going on now with Russia and Ukraine is accelerating that in overdrive. When you can take someone's reserve assets and just basically tell them they can't be used anymore. And China is looking at that saying, well, they're going to do that to us next. That's definitely accelerating the de-adoption of the dollar. I think we're headed towards a multipolar world, where there may be all sorts of local currencies, some with holding a bunch of gold in reserve, like the ruble. Those will probably be stronger currencies than others. We might have free floating, some currencies that are free floating with an exchange rate to gold. But I think I'm hoping that more and more we see gold as a natural transaction, and there's actually, you can have a currency that is not backed by gold. The mistake most people make is they save their money in their currency. A currency can be as a medium of exchange, but it's not a store of value if it's not backed by a physical asset. So we might have multiple competing currencies, but the mistake people make is saving in those currencies that can be printed and have their value eroded. You can instead save in gold. I kind of worry actually about governments backing their currencies by gold explicitly, because their track record of keeping that ratio has been quite bad. So I'd rather people be aware, okay, this isn't backed by gold. I may use it as an exchange medium, but I'm going to save my money in gold and silver.
All right. Now, just out of pure curiosity, as the Federal Reserve note comes to an end in the way that it's been positioned at this current moment, the transition into the CBDC. Do you see the CBDC introduction at whatever point is given here in the U.S. Preventing or shifting the idea of there being a hyperinflation in the U.S.? Because lots of people say that, U.S. is, the Federal Reserve is going to be hyperinflated away, Zimbabwe, Weimar Republic, dollars in the streets type of situation. Do you think the CBDC can prevent the paper style hyperinflation, but there be some type of digital ledger reserves created to the wazoo to give us a hyperinflationary effect?
Well, I guess.
It's a loaded question. I apologize.
No, there's a lot there. So a central bank digital currency, I guess, could make hyperinflation. How do I say it? You wouldn't have wheelbarrows of cash. It would just be the number would go up.
Yeah.
So it'd be easier to manage, but the net effect would still be the same. People would be getting their savings wiped out.
Right.
Of course, then you're going to toss universal basic income into that, where that gets put on your CBDC card. But I mean, the idea of central bank digital currencies, I think, is an awful one. I mean, if you look at freezing the accounts of people who donated to the truckers, or taking the reserve assets away from Russia, that's going to, once you have central bank digital currencies, that they can do that to anyone,
right.
Not just countries. So, social credit scores, all that kind of things. It's just the absolute worst form of control that I can imagine. And, there's probably gonna be some incentive to opt into it. But I don't think that it's gonna work. I hope people aren't going to put up with that. And I hope people are going to seek alternatives to something like that.
Right.
It's certainly not going to fix anything. I heard one of your guests saying how great it would be because it would kind of get rid of all the banks. Get rid of all the banks except for one.
Right.
I mean, you haven't gotten rid of all the banks.
Right.
You've just monopolized the banks into one, and you've monopolized it into a bank that, is tied very closely to the government, which means you're giving the government even more power than they already have.
Right. And in that interview, I know exactly what you're referring to. He was a former Federal Reserve banker and one of the too big to fail bank employees. So I realized in the midst of that talk there where it's going to be heading. So I was trying to throw some curveballs at him, but it's hard because there's no change in his thought because he's embedded into the system in a sense. But it was great discussion overall.
But he is right. I mean, it would eliminate all these banks, which is why the banks are not too excited about it.
Right.
But
then again, in eliminating the banks, and I tried to hint at him, was that, the too big to fail banks, they are still shareholders of the Federal Reserve Bank. So who's really losing in this equation? Because they're not going away. They're just, they're disappearing off the surface level. But then again, they're going to show up in an app on your phone in some capacity that still benefits from the single currency that comes from the Federal Reserve. So it's still a banker's win-win. So, unless we do away with that completely, then we're still in the same mess, just in a rebranded form, I think.
Yeah, we need to be decentralizing, not centralizing even further. That's the exciting thing about kind of the digital asset space is it is a very, very decentralized system. I see that as a great way. Bitcoin kind of taught people that there's a way around the banks, a decentralized way, and I just think increasingly, when you look at the volatility, people are going to see a higher and higher need to have these digital assets backed by something physical.
All right, good point there. Now, just to shine more light on the day-to-day usage of metals, to go back towards you mentioned earlier, Soviet Union time frame when the monetary situation was very rough there. Precious metals and actual practical use in that time frame there, if we were to use it in the same type of similarities, rather, how good would an ounce of silver be for a person who is solely trapped into fiat currency, but yet you do happen to have some silver ounces? did it do wonders for people as far as allowing them to still be able to transact and access things, pay bills, do whatever was needed? Did they suffer in their entirety, in a sense?
Yeah, I haven't gone into depth on that. I mean, I do know that, if you look at the Weimar hyperinflation, the people that held gold during that, when they came out the end, they owned everything, because, they had the real asset, they had the real money. So they were able to buy up all these assets for super cheap when coming out the other end. The other interesting thing about that is once they returned to a gold-backed monetary system, things improved almost immediately. And that's, people paint a bunch of doom and gloom, but to me, the doom and gloom has been the last 50 years. We've seen an erosion of the middle class. We've seen loss of our manufacturing base. We've seen, a larger and larger disparity in income. Readopting sound money is the cure to that. There's that things will be better then. I don't think I answered your question. I do know there was somebody I was listening to recently. One of the silver, he talks about like, how will you spend your silver if things really go bad? He says, you'll be surprised how remarkably easy it is. Because think about it, when if you've got a hyperinflationary situation, you won't have a problem finding people to sell you stuff in hard currency.
Right. And that's one of the things where, we hope we never get to that point, but the probability is likely. But then again, at that moment as well, a lot of people are not educated into how to test for real metals, rather than, because it's going to be like always, whenever there's a crisis, there's opportunity for criminals to come in and flood the market with counterfeit, whatever it might be. So I'd imagine it's probably a lot of that right now floating around, and then a lot more to come in environments like that. So educating people on how to distinguish between fake and real and things like that is going to be important as well. So it's just going to be interesting to see what type of environment we'll be in. But as far as what you guys are doing at Sound for Money, you guys actually have small coins that you're encouraging people to, I guess, give out in transactions. Give us a little bit of that and how it came about. And do you have any handy just to show the viewers? I'd be curious to see them directly.
So we have these, technically, I guess they call them rounds. I call them coins, but supposedly you got to be a government to make coins. So these are 5th ounce silver. So it's got our logo on the front, Citizens for Sound Money. On the back, that's the old man in the mountain from New Hampshire, and live free, the state motto. And then it's got our website on there. 999 fine silver. These are 1/5 of an ounce. So essentially like a 20, back when the dollar was an ounce of silver, it would be the equivalent of a 20-cent piece.
Okay.
Of course, these are worth about $5 or $6 now. So this is what you'd call a fractional, because it's less than an ounce. And fractionals are really hard to find right now, and they're really expensive. So Kinesis actually minted these for us. And what we're doing is on our newsletter, which people can sign up for on our website, citizensforsoundmoney.org, with a number 4. If you sign up for our newsletter, each month we'll come out with a coupon code where you can get these at cost. Because normally the premiums would be like 80-90%. I think it's about 40% premium on these, which is still relatively expensive, but cheaper than the premiums on a Liberty Silver Eagle. I mean, and then so this is our little pack. So it's a 10-pack, 2 ounces worth. This way you can keep it in your pocket, slide it open. And the idea here is that so fractionals we wanted, this is not what you would normally buy to like save up, because, well, you could, it's just the premiums are higher because the labor is the same as making a 1 ounce coin, but they're 1/5 of an ounce. But the great thing about these is because they're small enough, you can give them out as tips. So $5 or $6 is a reasonable amount to give somebody as a tip. And then, start that conversation. I found over the last decade, I've talked to a lot of people about gold and silver, and they're always like, when you give them one of these and put it in their hand first, it makes a really big difference in starting that conversation. And then they've got the website on there to get some more information and resources.
All right, sounds good. So now, so I appreciate you for sharing that. Just because when I saw that, I'm like, wow, they're literally, trying to put silver into people's hands in the form of a tip or just for educational pieces. And so I've done some things on my end where I like to go out to the streets and hold up around and ask people questions, similar to what Mark Dice did with his. But other than that, just the best way is to get out there and actually, let people feel it in their hands so they realize what they're either missing out on or what they need more of. But once again, but no, Jim, I thank you for joining us here and just shining more light as to what you guys are doing at Citizens for Sound Money. You guys definitely doing great work. I appreciate you for, taking time to sit down with me. Looking forward to connecting with you in the future and seeing where you guys are at, and definitely just continue to plug along, my friend. It's an uphill battle, but I think it's well worth it for everybody involved in educating people. So appreciate you.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing what you're doing, educating a whole group of people. Really appreciate it. And by the way, this is a kid's book that we have. That's on our website. And we're going to include one of these, this 1,000th of an ounce of gold in like a sheet form, gold bucks or gold backs. We interviewed these guys. These are neat little products. So we're going to include those in there. But yeah, give me your address. Let me send you some of these coins so you've got some.
Appreciate you. Well, thank you once again, and definitely we'll connect. And once again, Jim, thanks for joining us on RTD Interviews.
All right. Thank you.